Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to our Support Your Local Police presentation in beautiful downtown Attleboro, Massachusetts, on this brisk, blustery early October day, Saturday. My name is Shurtleff, and I am the coordinator for the John Birch Society. I cover 5 of the New England states and a big chunk of upstate New York, and I've been on staff since 1990. And I live in Boston, Massachusetts, in the West Roxbury section. And I tell people, but don't hold that against me. Especially when I'm outside of New England. I said, I'm from Boston, but don't hold that against me, although I don't blame you if you did. And we do have our share of patriots in Boston, believe it or not. In fact, we had our last convention in a phone booth. It was very nice. But anyway, this is a very important issue, support your local police. And before I begin this relatively brief presentation, I want to point out that we are not supporting bad local policemen. We are not apologists for bad local police, just the opposite. But we definitely would rather see a bad local policeman than a bad federal policeman, because at least there's a chance of accountability. And I think most of us growing up as teenagers, we may have had, in maybe early 20s, had some experiences with the police, either driving too fast or maybe having too much to drink at some event. Most of us, a lot of us have had run-ins, and usually they're positive experiences. And for every bad experience, it's probably 100 or 200 or 1,000 positive experiences. And we say this: the police are not going to go away. And our job is to make the local police constitutionalists. There's a lot of them are not trained. The way they're trained, they're trained in certain things. They understand some of the law, but a lot of them don't know the full extent of it. And I'll give an interesting example. Back in the mid-90s, the Brady Law was passed. Some of you might be familiar with that. And a number of sheriffs, not a large number, a small number of sheriffs said, no, we're not going to comply with this. So they bucked the Brady Law. And we had an information table in the town of Tunbridge, Vermont at a fair. And there was a detail of, I don't know what kind of police they were, I just were in their certain kind of jumpsuit type uniforms. And I had copies of that magazine, The New American, with the story. It was a front page story, Sheriffs Bucking the Brady Law. And this fellow with a badge is looking intently at the article, and I'm saying, I'm going to open up a conversation with him. And I said, oh yes, this is a lot of sheriffs, including one here in Vermont. He said, yes, I'm that sheriff, Sheriff Sam Frank. Now Sam, he's now in Virginia, I think, but he told me originally it wasn't the Second Amendment that was his big issue, or the Constitution of the United States. His issue was the fact that the county could not afford to implement the Brady Law. You see, the federal government will pass things and maybe throw a few bucks your way, but a little county and a little state probably doesn't get a lot of money. So he said originally it wasn't the Second Amendment or the right to keep bear arms that motivated him, but he became a constitutionalist along the way. He ended up meeting Sheriff Richard Mack out of Arizona, and he would come by the table every year. I got to know him. We'd see him during the year. And we had a little 10-question quiz he would offer people to come to the table, open up conversation, and offer them the Constitution. He said, I want copies of this for my deputies, because not only did he become a constitutionalist, but his deputies did too. And Sheriff Mack has an interesting story. He was a local policeman, I'm not sure what town in Arizona, before he became a sheriff, and that was an elected official position. And he was really gung-ho. He was going to just save the world. He was very proud of all the busts he would make, all the tickets he would give out. Good cop, honest, but he was just by the book. And one day a lady blows a red light. He's right on it. Yeah, I want to give her a ticket. He's really happy with himself. You know, I got another one. And here's this poor lady. She got a carload of children. The car was a broken down junk. And realizing that the lady probably was really making ends meet. I don't know what her situation was. And he gave her a ticket. And then it really bothered him. He said, is this what I signed up for? He said, I gave a ticket to this poor lady who probably can't even afford to fill a gas tank and will pay the ticket and not be able to feed her children. So that turned him around at that point, become constitutional. So that's really what our job is. It's to stop the federal takeover of the local police, mainly through money and equipment that comes with it. And it's hopefully make the local policemen, and also to give the average citizen a better appreciation of the local police. So we'll get into the presentation here. Today's violence, reminiscent of the 60s and 70s. I remember a little bit of that. I was kind of young at the time, in the 60s, not the 70s. And I was relating about my forced busing experience in Boston and how the local police versus the federal police. In fact, I was relating where I was actually assaulted just because I was going late to class by a federal marshal. And when I called 911 after I left school to complain, the dispatcher laughed and said they're above, the feds are beyond reproach or beyond accountability. So anyway, we see the violence in Ferguson and Baltimore and other places, and there may be more. If George Soros has his way, there will be. The JBS stopped the movement for a national police force and set the communist movement back 25 years. And we use the word communist because that's what it was. In fact, back in the 30s, the Communist Party had 100 things they knew to take over the United States. One of them is to create a federal police force. You say, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. Well, Congress didn't think so. The communists plot against the free world hearings at the subcommittee to investigate the administration and the internal security, etc. I have a copy of this. You can get it. You'll probably get it on Google Images, Google Books, I mean. So to read for yourself the people behind this and the organizations behind it. Without the National Police Force, they could not move the rest of their plans forward, since they would not be able to control the American people. They have waited an entire generation to again attempt a National Police Force. Working quietly behind the scenes, they are now breaking out into the open. And we started this, we were founded back in 1958. In the early 60s, we started this Support Your Local Police campaign and keep them independent. In fact, the man who coined the term is a friend of mine. He's now 91 or 92. He's a retired Boston policeman who, one of the most intense guys I've ever met, but also one of the most honest and one of the most decent and generous men. He was doing one-handed push-ups up until his 80s and never drew his gun. All the years on the police force, never drew his gun. So, obvious coordination by the communists. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody here is a formal member of the Communist Party, but when you look at different cities, these things are happening, and you see the same signs, that's not spontaneous. Now, they can have these handmade signs to be look more spontaneous, but they're not. And it's interesting, too, what happened in Ferguson and in Baltimore. Now, Baltimore is predominantly black. You get a black mayor. More than half the people on the police force are black. But it's still about this Black Lives Matter. Well, I think Black Lives Matter. I think all lives matter. And we know that in Chicago, there are more people killed on a regular basis, black on black crime, but you never hear about that. You just hear these rare, unfortunate circumstances. And so when you see similar signs, similar websites, you know there's got to be a little handy. It's a little too obvious, okay? The action is in the reaction. That's what Solinsky said, right? That means that the event is staged, or the event, sometimes they just take advantage of these negative things too. And what happens is, the solution is always more federal control. Always. Whether it be the shooting incident that happened in Oregon just a couple of days ago, Ferguson, it's always, we have a solution. More federal money, more federal control. That's going to solve the problem, right? So Al Sharpton, why this man is even given the time of day. What's sad is that he's on a lot of the conservative or neoconservative shows. This man does not belong in the mainstream media, but there he is. He's a full-time race hustler. He calls himself a reverend. Yeah, he was a child prodigy. I think he was ordained at the age of 9 or 10. But when's the last time he gave a sermon and advocated accepting Jesus? And what did Jesus? He said, "What Jesus is supposed to be the Prince of Peace." This man is bringing division, hardcore division. He's a race baiter, and he makes a lot of money. He's a millionaire as a result, right? And here you see Cleveland, the city of Cleveland, has formally agreed to allow to accept federal guidelines, right? Sharpton to hold march on Washington to demand the Department of Justice take over of U.S. police departments. And interesting, yeah. So he knows the playbook. He knows the playbook very well. Now I want to point this picture out. The action is in the reaction. Now you see, this is from the 60s, this old picture here. And you see this poor black lady and 3 white policemen who, when they're not eating donuts, they're beating up black people. That's all they do. You see, that's the appearance, that they must be racist, and they beat up black people, right? And you see the picture here, right? They got a billy club, and this poor defenseless woman. Well, the reality was, she grabbed the club from one of the policemen, because you see here, it's upside down. She's got the club, and they're trying to take it away from her, you see. But out you see this, and you think, boy, these guys are really bad. So, so the lady got out of control, unfortunately, and they were restraining her. That's really what happened. And sometimes you need them more. I mean, you got some person going off with a club, I probably want a little backup too. And it's always good to have backup. You always want to take it alone. So, but you see this picture, and the media does this all the time. The mass media, the corporate media. I'll never forget a picture in Bosnia. Different issue, but they want us to justify the invasion of dropping bombs in Bosnia. And he showed this poor emaciated guy with some kind of, looked like he had scars on his chest, and he's behind a fence. Oh my goodness, they're starving people to death. There's concentration camp. We have to do something. The guy was actually on the outside of the fence, looking in, and he had some kind of he had some kind of ailment that made him look that way. But the media didn't care. But it got everyone's sympathy. So, yeah, and it's, with today's sophistication and technology, it's a lot easier to fool people. Like the days of Stalin, you know, he would take people out of picture. It was too obvious, right? Put people in. You know, you didn't have to be an expert on it, but now it's a little more difficult. So there's no need for federal oversight, as this chart points out. Internal affairs, chief of police, mayor, city council, city attorney, county commissioners, state attorney general, governor, legislators, and ballot box. These are all remedies at the local level that should work. This is, I say, these are the different, and our founders of our nation set up these layers of government on purpose. And the most efficient layer of government, if I can use the word efficient and government in the same sentence, you know, is the local level, right? Look at what happened in New Orleans. You think if they had their act together, that they could get people on those buses and take them out? They had to wait for the feds to come and tell us what to do, you see. And the feds, and then they had Mexican army came in New Orleans. Then you know you're in trouble when that's happening, right? So, but if the local people had their act together, if you had something called a real militia, it would have been, yeah, there would have been a lot of bad things happening. The rains would have still taken out a lot of the floods would have taken out a lot of the property, but it wouldn't have lost so many lives because people weren't prepared. And here you could alleviate most of the situations simply by doing it at the local level. Police corruption. If the local police are corrupt, it is a localized, not national. If they are corrupt, it can be changed by the people. If a national police are corrupt, it is all over the country and unlikely to be changed without a major social and political upheaval. And what they usually do if there's a bad cop, if it's they don't have federal police, but I'd say a bad FBI agent, they just move him to another part of the country, right? You know, and you know, Whitey Bulger, Boston, just a little north of us. How did Whitey Bulger operate as long as he did? He had the FBI. He had some bad FBI. If there was and there were some local cops too, no doubt involved. As I read a few of the books, and a particular uncle actually betrayed his own niece, you know, and helped Whitey take over a liquor store. But the feds, a couple of them, maybe more than 2 or 3, make that possible. So funny when we watch these movies, you watch these movies glorifying federal police and federal marshals. They never show that. They don't tell you about that. And it's always the local cop who's the fat redneck, you know, unsophisticated boob who just lets all the bad guys go, you know. And Tommy Lee Jones, he's going to fix it. This federal marshal, he's got to. So there is a plan. The insiders want a national police force to control the American people. No socialist country has local independent police, and no state can be totalitarian without a national police force. So that's a reality. Any country, most countries have federal police and federal control. I don't care. They may have a local police station, but it's federally controlled. In Mexico, the federales. You know. Internationalists want a national police. Local police forces obviously would be reduced as state and national police forces is increased. This was a speech before the Foreign Policy Association of Pennsylvania by Congressman Joseph Clark Baldwin, and look at the time frame, February 13th, 1943, in support of the Atlantic Charter. And it's funny, 43 is when the Gestapo was still going strong, right? You would think, gee, the Gestapo, this was the local, and Gestapo only had 6,000 or 7,000 agents. And they were feared throughout Germany. The Russians, the KGB had about 20 times more. Now it's a bigger country, but you imagine. He went on to support the downsizing of the U.S. Armed Forces before the formation of an international police force. And it's not in this presentation, but in 1961, there was a document called State Department Document 7277, which you can find on Google Books. In there, it advocated a standing world army, and the only people who would have guns would be a federal police. And that's supposed to be, that's still the policy of our government all these years later. Every so often we would write to these state officials, State Department of State officials, and say, yeah, oh yeah, that's still our policy. We have letters over the last 20 or 30 years pointing that out. Now militia, I mentioned a little bit earlier. There is no constitutional prerogative for the police to be controlled by the federal government. The 9th and 10th Amendments. No, the 9th and 10th Amendments are not dead letters. They have not been repealed. The 9th one says basically that the rights that were enumerated in the Constitution are not used to deny, disparage others retained, I should say not rights but powers, by the states or by the people. So the people have powers and rights. Governments only have powers. And the 10th Amendment says what we didn't, in so many words, what we didn't specifically limit at the federal level or deny to the states are retained by the states and to the people. Those are two of the most important amendments, and most people don't even acknowledge them. And some talk shows like Mark Levin, oh, if you advocate the 10th Amendment, you're a states' rightist or something like that, or a neo-Confederate. So if you're a true constitutionalist, you're a neo-Confederate in his eyes, right? The Constitution does not mention police power because police did not exist at that time. Local authority was through the sheriff and the militia. And when I say militia, again, there's a media misconception. You think of a bunch of middle-aged, overweight, fat white guys running through the woods, worry about some UN, occupying forces. That's not a militia. A militia is an entity that's set up by the state. The governor has jurisdiction, and if necessary, the President of the United States can call them out to put down internal revolutions and what have you. We haven't really had a true militia since 1903. This National Guard is not the militia. Their mission is wholly different. A militia would be made up of local people. And it's interesting, back in the 1840s, there was something called the Aroostook Wars, northern Maine. There wasn't any gun, it was between Canadians and Mainers. 10,000 militia were called up, 10,000 in 1848. Maine it has a small population today. Could you imagine, I'm guessing the population may have been 100,000. 10,000 is 10% of the people, and they didn't have, they couldn't drive up 95. They had to march on horseback or walk. So a lot of people were involved in that militia, and it was responsibility and it was accountability. And thankfully it was resolved without any gunfire, but we were ready. And and it's not just used for that type of thing, the military. It's used for flooding and for emergencies. The militia is a state prerogative for unrest and the federal prerogative for invasion and rebellion, a citizen-run entity. So J. Edgar Hoover, now he may not be the most popular person, and he was very much against the federal police. I tell you, you may not like him. He's got a lot of bad press, maybe some of it deserved, maybe some of it not. But I don't think his agents would be firing at unarmed women with babies in their hands. I guarantee that would not have happened. You would not have had a Waco or a Ruby Ridge with a guy like. And back in the 90s, you remember Louis Freeh under Bill Clinton? Louis Freeh goes to Moscow, and he's meeting with some Russian, what they call it, FSB now. They used to be called KGB. They changed the names. Just mix around the letters, it's the same thing. He said, they opened up an office. He said, together we are invincible. Why? Do the research. I wish I could. If I could make this kind of stuff up, I'd be a novelist. I'd be like a Stephen King. I remember when it happened. I said, "Where's the outrage? Why do we want our FBI opening up an office in Moscow and then saying we're invincible together? You have a limited job. You're supposed to uphold the law, federal laws, and you're supposed to basically be an investigation arm. Now you're working with the Russians to be invincible." Yeah. So the destruction of federalism. A national police would be controlled by the executive branch, completely destroying the federal balance of power between the three branches of government, the states and local government. The call is not for Congress, but for the Department of Justice. That's what you saw with Al Sharpton a few slides ago. The executive branch to have oversight. So Congress would be out of the loop. Now we know our Attorney General, well, we can rely on she, before that it was, they had no trouble participating in smuggling weapons, giving weapons to gangs in Mexico and having them smuggled in. And that was part of their project. There was no outcry, there was no people in the streets and what have you. When people were killed by those guns, right? And there's a lot of laws that the federal government wants to ignore. They tell this lady in Kentucky that you're evil because you're violating a Supreme Court order, not a law, and they put her in jail until she changes her mind. But what about these laws on illegal immigration? What about states and towns and cities that become refugee zones? What's the term? Not refugee zones, there's another term for it. Amnesties, cities or what have you. So they're not even going to try to enforce the federal laws, and the Attorney General is okay with that, you see. So they're going to be, and my point is, they're very selective in what laws they decide to enforce. And I guarantee it, they will be enforcing these very much. The destruction of federalism. Once again, cities led by liberal leftist leaders acquiesce to federal oversight. The pressure for all cities to do so will be intense, and it will bypass Congress. Also, if they're not ideologically committed to this, they're financially committed. Hey, we need we don't have the budget, we take the money. And they talk about federal strings attached. They're not strings, they're chains. All in the name of police brutality. So it was in the 1960s, and so it is today. The controlled media always attacks the police, not the rioters and communist cadre. People claim they do not believe the media, then believe the charges of police brutality. They read and see in the media. When people see is a reaction by the police, not the provocation. And we come out with a special issue, September 2015, and it has some interesting statistics which some people don't like. It mentions, first off, the crime rate has gone down dramatically in the last 20 years. Violent crime has gone down. Maybe not every city, but an interesting trend. But it said that there are about 6,000 blacks are murdered every year in the United States. Tragedy. 90% of those are murdered by other blacks. And of the police that are killed every year, 45% of the perpetrators are black. So, and the black population is about 14 to 15%. So does that mean that blacks have it out for white cops? No, of course not. It means some bad guys who happen to be black are killing policemen. Doesn't mean that that's a trend or that they promote that. So you can put a spin on anything you like. You know the old saying that statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics. So you can bend and twist. And a lot of it's emotion too. You know, a lot of it's emotion. We base our policy on emotion, not sit there and think things through. So here's that picture again I just showed you. The action isn't a reaction. Power. Now here's some history lessons. If power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lord Acton, he said that many years ago. Two-pronged initiative. Now this is the solution. And educate opinion molders on the dangers of the national police. In fact, we can educate them on the dangers of federal control in general. When I testified against an Article 5 convention in Maine, and well, what's your solution? And I said to them, stop taking the federal money. That's the first step. You don't take the money, you don't have the control. But they like that because they don't have to worry about raising taxes. They don't want to cut the size of government. They don't want to raise taxes, so they take it from let the feds raise the size of government. Educate the police on the dangers of going to the federal government for solutions to local problems. And that's what we've been doing. Back a couple of years ago, we had a reprint 3 articles that we mailed to every single police department in the country. And in Boston or New York, where there's a lot of different police departments, we mail one to the chief, but also to every captain. And we've been visiting police departments all over the country. And the article we had an article in that particular issue on the Southern Poverty Law Center. You're supposed to say boo hiss when I bring up that name. For poverty, they're worth about $500 million. So the poverty is, they should take the word poverty out and put wealth in there, right? But they want to look at, they're trying to get the police to blame anybody who's, if you're a pro-lifer, or if you have a bumper sticker that says, get us out of the UN, or a bumper sticker that says, I support the Constitution, or you're a veteran, you're a potential terrorist. So, but thankfully, a lot of the policemen are saying, we don't want your stuff anymore. We're not buying into it. And I like to think that we had something to do with that. And I think the FBI, even under the Obama administration, said, we're not using you guys as a resource anymore. So they're very active, the Southern Poverty Law, one of the organizations that's pushing this, right? Southern Poverty Law Center. You think it has something to do with helping people become enfranchised, right? That's a good goal, that people in poverty, help them get out of poverty by influencing local police. And I don't know how that, I think they've gone beyond their mission statement just a little bit, right? So what else we have here? This was the one that came out, and I have a few on the table, the one I mentioned a little while, just a minute ago. So this particular one, we sent the chiefs of police, police union officers, businessmen, opinion molders, talk show hosts, and the like. This is what we need you to do. We like to form a local support your local police committee. We had these all over the country at one time. There's an incredible story. Back in the mid-60s, the city of New York was, the police were under assault, and they were trying to start something called a civilian review board. Now, it sounds pretty nice, but the people who would man these would be people of they would be appointed by the liberal mayor, and they would, pun intended, handcuff the police. So the JBS had a committee in each borough, very active. And one day Robert Welch is going to an event at a hotel, and Robert Welch is the founder of the John Birch Society. And there was some policemen on detail. "Are you Mr. Robert Welch of the John Birch Society?" He said, "Well, yes, I am." He said, "We want to thank you for saving our police department." Well, it wasn't so much Robert Welch, but his organization and the members that made that happen. So can you help form a support your local police committee? Can you help gift us the necessary funds we will need to implement a necessary robust campaign? And some of the tools that we have the magazine. I just got 1,000 copies. I'm already down to about 800 because the purpose of the material isn't to sit in my barn and get dusty. It's to get out and distribute it. And we have bumper stickers that you can put not only on your car, but wall lockers if you're in school or wherever you can put bumper stickers. Now we have window decals, which you really can't see too well here. You peel them off, and we're trying to get members of the business community to put little boxes and sell these for whatever, $2 or $3, $1, put them in the window, and help to raise money for the local committee. Then we just came out with some great pamphlets. I just got these actually in the mail a couple of days ago. Some of the resources that you can have, how you can help your local police, and then we have what we call a Slim Jim, and what you can do. And I'll just review the little Slim Jim. 10 minutes a week, like our Support Your Local Police Facebook page. That's a very easy thing to do, right? Subscribe to our newsletter at jbs.org, and top daily headlines at thenewamerican.com. So once a day you get an email with some great articles, and articles that deal with this that you can copy and paste and send out. That takes about 10 minutes of your day, right? 30 minutes. Visit the Support Your Local Police page at jbs.org to learn more and take action. And there's a lot of things you can do. You can email just from that site. You can email to local police, to local officials, or what have you, local elected officials. Share the Support Your Local page with others. Decide if a Support Your Local Police committee could help in your area. A few hours a day. Join or create a Support Your Local Police committee. Order and distribute the materials that are available here. Shopjbs.org. Get acquainted with your police chief and sheriff. How many people know their police chief? I don't know mine. I know some local police. We have a lot of JBS members of local police, but I don't know the sheriff. Well, the sheriff in Suffolk County, I don't know the sheriff. I don't know the captain, but maybe I'm going to know the captain because I'm going to go into the local West Roxbury and leave this stuff off with them. At evening, attend local government meetings and support local police. See, sometimes the left-wing activists, they come to all these events, and the people think, everyone must think this way. But not everyone thinks this way. Some of us are too busy working for a living. Someone has to pay the bills, right? And mom and dad, they've worked all day long, and the last thing they want to do is go out to a meeting. That's really challenging today. So support your local police committees and activities. I also add to become a formal member of the John Birch Society, the parent organization of this. In fact, I'd rather see you become a member today and help us that way too. And a few things we've done just in the last few weeks here. The Boston Patrolmen's Union, not a union, I should, Boston Patrolmen's Association. In fact, my former landlord, now deceased, and a man that was a profound impact in my life, he's the one that introduced me to the John Birch Society. I've heard about it before, but, and I had a lot of respect for him. He was a former boxer, a wonderful guy too. He was about 6'3", and we worked together, and then he had an apartment, and moved, so I moved in. So for 5 years, and he's the one that loaned me the book that I read, which got me to the John Birch Society, although he was not a member himself, Warren Bradley. So I visited the Patrolmen's Association just a few weeks ago in Roxbury, in Boston, Roxbury. And it was in a house, and I brought in some of the magazines, and boy, they were very receptive. And I dropped the name Warren Bradley. I didn't know him, but in the 50th anniversary book, there's my old landlord right there, so I was able to make that connection. And one of the top officials, too, was Chester Broderick of the Boston Police, and he was a JBS member. So the gentleman said, "Can you have more of these?" I met the treasurer, I met the president, vice president, and secretary. I said, "How many do you need?" He said, "We're having a meeting tonight, there'll be 60. I said, "I'll give you 100. How's that?" "Oh yeah, we'll put them out." Then he said, "Well, we have a group, we already have a presentation, but could you come back here and give a talk?" I said, "Yeah, I think I can be convinced of doing that." And then I discovered, as I was promoting this event, I discovered a group called Massachusetts Law Enforcement Support. And it's really made up of family members of police, mostly local police, state police and local police. And I got their website and I got their email addresses and let them know what we're doing. They're based out of Weymouth, but they're statewide. So there may be groups like that. I know a lot of police departments have their own Facebook page, so we can just post this information, like these bumper stickers, and you can get these pictures, you can download the pictures and put them up there. And we'd like to, maybe do this presentation again as we get more people interested. And I say, what we need, new tools, videos, reprints, pamphlets, etc. Social media initiative, national law enforcement mailings, contacts, national coordinator to help local committees, organize and strategize, speakers. And the best speaker is usually a policeman, right? Or retired policeman. My boss, Jim Fitzgerald, was a Newark police detective. And he's just one guy. He's on a speaking tour, but we will have a lot more, of course. And coordinate with other organizations, like, for example, Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers is a group that is made up of first responders and retired military, current active duty military, and we'll be doing that as well. And I think this will be a natural thing for them. If we don't do it, who will? Who will do it? And we're also introducing this to Tea Party groups, because I think this is a natural thing for a lot of Tea Party groups. There'll be interest in that. So it's up to us. They say they should do something about it. That's what we are. We're they trying to do something about it. And that's our website, jbs.org. So I want to thank you for your attention. And please make sure you don't leave here without, it's a sign. In fact, let me give you an assignment right now. Visit your local police department today or Monday, and hopefully make an appointment with the chief and let them know what we're doing with this material, and take it from there. And sometimes they're a little straight-faced because they can't really take sides or what have you sometimes, but they know. There's a lady in my church who's a policewoman, and I stopped at the Dedham Police. And there she was. I didn't know she worked right in, and I took a big stack. She says, "I could put them in the break room. I'll put them all over the break room." So these are the kind of things we do. So a lot of times people want to help me with my, help me. I need some help. I say, yeah, the best way to help is take the material yourself and go with it. So again, we want to thank you and God bless.
No, I think you'd find